They'll be calling you a radical. I think it's time, as this whole path of Fukushima, that we reflect back. So many people come to YouTube, the Johnny-come-latelys, the hypocrites that want to go in. They pick a moment in time on one of these videos, whatever. That's the genre of YouTube. As you know, I've been ranting and raving, carrying on this even before this happened. Let's talk about, I think it's time to talk about the conspiratorial nature of Fukushima, because so many people are getting involved now as they come in now, and I can understand, especially the young people now, but the old hypocrites who claim to be environmentalists, don't you show up now. Go sit down where you've been. You've done nothing for 40 years. You are not the solution. You've been the problem. But this will tell everything about the conspiracy. This is Sanjay Gupta M.D.'s show. Let's set some background. First off, Sanjay Gupta and Anderson Cooper went over there when the tsunami happened. They were there. They were in Fukushima. As we know, the wind was blowing out. By luck, if the wind was blowing over, Japan would have been totally evacuated and no one would have ever went back. But it was blowing out. As even Gunderson was in my sight in the early days, I was giving these very early reports, going crazy, was arguing with me, telling me that I didn't know the difference between a hydrogen blast. I knew it was a full core meltdown. I've been in this freaking fight my entire life. I didn't work for the industry like him. I've been fighting this my whole life. I've been not eat, sleep, drink it. I've been sleeping with it, as you know. Well, that's a whole nother thing. But anyway, they came home. And that's when Gupta learned his lesson, who he works for. Now, Ackerman, pay attention, because this artist is up in Toronto, Canada. His name's Donald Weber. He's funded by CNN. He's funded by the nuclear industry. His name's Donald Weber. I want to talk about how this played out. This will tell you everything. Because I put out multiple calls to find this, because they took it down after there. And you could see why. Finally, a whistleblower showed up and brought it to me. You know, gave it. I have it. Sanjay Gupta M.D. Chernobyl and Hiroshima, lessons from previous nuclear moments in history. Elizabeth Taylor's lasting legacy as pioneer for AIDS research, keeping kids safe during travel. Aired March 26, 2011. Served 38 ET. Remember, this is when this was ongoing. Nobody was reporting it, Meltdown. This was still in the very acute situation. Music. Gupta, first off, the nuclear scare in Japan, their workers do not yet have full control over the damaged reactors. Now in Tokyo, early in this week, there was a run on bottled water after these tests found radioactive iodine in tap water at a higher level that was known to be safe for infamous. Later on, the level did go back down. There's his first plate. Remember, this is a neurosurgeon who took the oath, who was nominated to be the Surgeon General. This is not Ann Calder. This is not a flamethrower. Rush Limbaugh's video killed the media star, making millions propaganding. No, this is a neurosurgeon who took the oath. This is malice. This is criminal. These people need to go to prison. But you might wonder about radiation in the United States. EPA monitors along the West Coast, as you can see here, Colorado and Hawaii, they have been picking up traces of radiation from Japan. As we know, RadNet was picking up massive traces in the early day, and then RadNet goes down. RadNet, the radiation detection, which by the way, Gina McCarthy was head of, which failed grotesquely, magically, which now she's head of the EPA. Talk about reward failure. As we had Geiger counters, everybody was picking this up. Gupta. But the question a lot of people are asking, not only in the States, but around the country, is how important is that? Well, not very. Another grotesque lie. The levels right now are so low, they won't even have any effect on human health here in the States. That's important to remember. And you know, beyond all this, there's something else that's getting lost. 500,000 people out of their homes. In Japan, more than 27,000 people killed or missing in many places. There's a shortage of basic supplies like food and blankets. That's important stuff. Absolutely, it's important stuff. That's the whole point. That's enough to shut down all nuclear right there. People don't go back. Then in other news, they talk about Liz Taylor, blah, blah, blah. Okay, back to the story. Well, coming up, we're looking at the impact that a nuclear disaster can have on people and their families. We're going to do sort of an interesting way. Interviews to a photographer who's built his unique relationship with people who live around Chernobyl. His photographs are simply stunning. We're going to show them. You know, we're still trying to understand the implications of the crisis at the nuclear plant in Japan. Everyone's looking for some point of reference. Well, 32 years ago this week, there was 3 Mile Island in Pennsylvania. A nuclear plant experienced a partial meltdown. That's the caveat. There's the subtle right there. As we know, it almost freaking released in the atmosphere. Some did. A little bit did, but Chernobyl to 3 Mile Island is a spit wad to an army of AK-47s. What was the health impact? The only long-term study with 20 years of data now, researchers at the University of Pittsburgh found only a slight increase in risk of one of the type of cancer, leukemia, not only among men who got the highest dose of radiation. Now let's remember why they did this first. This was written right out of the freaking nuclear industry playbook. Because most people don't understand the difference between Chernobyl, 3 Mile Island. They don't get it. So they're like, oh, okay, they're safe right there. This is the posture grown magic they play on you, and it works. Then, of course, there's Chernobyl in 1986, where there's a massive explosion at the old reactor in the Soviet Union. Let's stop right there. Old reactor in Soviet Union. That the nearby city became an essential ghost town, and there was cancer, mostly thyroid cancer in children. Chernobyl, no bullshit, has killed 40 million people. Well, as you know, I've been in the #1 leukemia unit in the world fighting for my life, given 2 months to live. As Celeste, the doctor, says when I walked out of there the other day, that Kevin, you're the biggest walking miracle. There was a young woman in there from the Ukraine this winter, or last spring, 23 years, I got to be friends with her. She passed away, 23 years old, of this evil disease last April. What is the hell? Well, now the World Health Organization blames the accident for about 4,000 deaths, although other researchers say the number could be much higher. Now let's understand that the World Health Organization, and the UN and the nuclear industry was hijacked in the early 50s, and this was a big fight when they put this number out, including that I was involved in, which is the most grotesque malice thing. As in the Battle of Chernobyl, she says in that documentary, if you never watched, she says the greatest thing to come out of this reactor was not plutonium, was not cesium, was not iodine, it was lies. So true. These are the lies. This is such grotesque malice has been played on us. Photographer Donald Weber has a unique view of this. He's been in Chernobyl more than 20 times, starting in 2004, and he joins us now from Toronto, Canada. Now remember, he says he's been there 20 times. Thanks for joining us, Donald Weber. Thanks for having me, Mr. Gupta. What prompted you to go to Chernobyl for the first time you went? Weber, well, I guess you could say I'm a child of the 80s, and when I was 12 years old, I was stricken with pneumonia and was stuck in my bed for 3 months during the spring of 1986. And I remember in early May listening to the radio on the disaster of Chernobyl was sort of looming. And at the time, of course, you know, it was the fear of the Cold War and that we were going to be annihilated by nuclear weapons. And you know, as a child, I honestly believed that, which you should have believed it, and you should believe it now, because we have been annihilated by nuclear weapons, because that is the whole thing. Gupta, right. Weber. And ever since that time, I had always kind of wanted to visit what was Chernobyl and what was the place called the Soviet Union. And you do know it took me 20 years to finally make it there, but I eventually did. Now remember, CNN says it right here in this, that they sponsored him, they're the ones that sent him, and the nuclear industry. He's funded totally 100% by them. Weber, when I first went, I think I probably imagined what all imagine, that this was some kind of circus or some kind of terror zone with three-headed monsters roaming around the forest. But when I got there, I was pleasantly surprised and shocked, and you know, blue sky, a very beautiful place, and quiet and tranquil, and people living their lives day to day, working out in their farms, working inside, going to work, raising children, getting married, dying, everything that you wanted to do where they were doing in the Ukraine. That was happening in Chernobyl, and that to me was the biggest surprise. That paragraph is so grotesque on so many. What person possibly really believes that three-headed monsters? That is such hyperbolic bullshit. One, it is bullshit. Two, Chernobyl's uninhabitable by law. He says he's in there and there's people walking around farming, doing all that. That is such grotesque, blatant law. It's evacuation zone by law still to this day. They are not farming in there. They're not living and dying. There's no one there. Nothing but the wolves. It's such grotesque lies. I mean, blatant in your face malice. Weber, or Gupta, one of the concerns, obviously, after disaster like this is that the air is essentially contaminated, that it's dirty, that you're going to get radioactive here, not just for weeks, but for months, but for decades, even to come. What is that true in Chernobyl? Now let's remember, that is the NRC. They use the word dirty as the left has fallen for it, as the hypocrites fought, as they use dirty coal, dirty, 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 because you can't see this is clean. Nuclear energy is thousands of times dirtier than coal ever dreamed to be. It's the most dirty, filthy, freaking thing in the history of mankind. It's a mass murder, freaking economic disaster, environmental disaster. It's filthy, it's dirty, but that's the buzzwords they use. You can see who wrote this. Weber, well, I think that the concern for contamination is very much there. But you know, I give a little bit of quick background history of the region of Chernobyl. It's essentially an agricultural zone, and which means that you know it's not necessarily poverty-stricken, but it's definitely a very poor zone. So a lot of these people didn't have anywhere else to go. Again, it was Stalin's great freaking drainage of the marshes that created their food basket. It's one of the greatest projects in world history, and it was not poor. It absolutely was not poor. It was the food bread basket for that part of the world that fed millions and millions and millions and millions. And a lot of these people in the village, you know, were born in this village, you're raised in this village, and you want to die in that village, so you have nowhere else to go regardless of what poisoned you. Well, there's the fallacy of nuclear, right? You don't go back. You can't ever go back. And here again, he's lying. They left, mandatory. They made them leave. They're all out of there. He's saying they're there. That's a lie, blatant lie. Gupta, even now, I've just returned from Japan, as you know, and there's a lot of misinformation out there, and understanding, a lot of anxiety. Do people over there, because they lived through this, do they understand how bad it was, or maybe how bad it actually was not in the long run? Weber, if you're walking down the street, you just say Chernobyl to someone and they're going to shake, and that's certainly very true in Ukraine. I would tell my Ukrainian friends, I'm going up to Chernobyl. In fact, my very first time, it took me 4 hours to finally find a driver that was willing to go up there. Everybody has said, you know you're crazy, you're going to die, you're going to get cancer, I'm not going up there. Do you think they're stupid over there? You don't think they understand how contaminated it is? They don't think they understand that they watch so many people, millions of people die in their communities? What do you think, they're just some kind of ignorant morons and they tell you that because it's not true? Of course, yeah, Femin goes in there. Certain people, you go in there for a freaking short term, whatever, and get some exposure and take some risk, but live long term, man. It's going to kill you. You're going to get leukemia and die. As the average ages went from 71 to 51 in the region. So I think there is a lot of misconceptions. And now the thing of the area of Chernobyl is actually a marsh area. As you know, a marsh works like a very natural filter. And it's, you know, at first they were saying the half-life of radiation was going to be centuries, but in reality it was just taking a few decades to not completely eradicate it, because it's still a very contaminated place. But you know, these marshes, these natural filtration of the marshes have actually cut down the amount of radiation that is still within the zone. Gupta, you had some very memorable moments, and I'd like to say we looked at some of your photographs. Can we share a couple of these with us? Number one, it's just contaminated, it was the day, and it'll be just contaminated. You think these scientists are just making these numbers up? Oh, that half-life's 24. You think we just spit them out and make them up? This is such hyperbole, a natural filter. This is such grotesque, blatant malice. Weber. Yes, I say that kind of stands out in my mind the most the first time there in 2005. We were just driving around and we stopped in a village at the edge of the exclusion zone, and we met a woman and her husband. He was a coal miner. Here we go. This is right out of the playbook. He had since retired a few years. They came from the east of Ukraine, a very heavy industrial coal mining area of the Ukraine, and they'd actually chosen to come to Chernobyl to die, essentially. And he told me, he says, Don, you know where I come from, the snow is black, but at least there the snow is white. He goes, when I walk outside every morning, I look up and the sky is blue and the white is snow, and the snow is white. You know, that is a blatant, grotesque lie. And to me, that is what is kind of troubling statement, because it is kind of the power of Chernobyl that is very deadly zone place to be, but you can't see what's going to kill you. Exactly. A lot of people would rather choose beauty over, you know, something that's not beauty, like a coal mine. So that, to me, that's really what's powered me to such grotesque posturing, grooming malice. Gupta, really quickly, Don, I know you're going to Japan. When you tell your friends or family that you're going, what do you say to you? And quickly, what do they say back to them? Weber, I've learned to understand what radiation is and how it can kill you, and I don't take stupid chances, you know. It's been 6 years in the making of Chernobyl work, and I think the reason it's been so long is because I'm dedicated to it. And I understand, you know, it's not just about the radiative plume that comes out of the factory, out of Fukushima or out of Chernobyl, but I'm interested in the psychological and sociological catastrophe that happens when people are forced to leave their homes. When cities are abandoned, when infrastructure is denied and you're sort of left in town, to me, those are the sort of things, and it's true. That part's the only true statement to say, because it is, because you don't go back. They're gone, and it is devastating to people. Gupta, right. Weber, and it's also an area, I guess, that it's not so contaminated as the factory itself, the factory. It's not a factory, and it is. Gupta, well, I wish you safe travels, Don. Thanks so much for sharing some of these pictures and stories with us. And obviously, we'll continue to report on the safe travels. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks. Just extraordinary photos. And then Gupta puts up a picture right here of two men fishing with a striped bass. There's no striped bass over there. It's a posture and group fisher fishing. Right as we're reporting that people are panicking about we should eat fish or not, it's pure malice. The whole thing was a dog and pony show. It's criminal because Sanjay Gupta is a neurosurgeon. This is so grotesque. And they immediately took it down a few days later. It took me a long time to turn that down. Stay tuned to Sanjay Gupta M.D. And I want to talk about radiation. Here we're going to go into the second part. Gupta. Dr. Risko Kamaski was 2 years old when the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima more than 65 years ago. Her family lost 6 relatives. Her grandmother had radiation sickness. Dr. Risko Kamashi, Anderson Cancer Center. Her fell out and she had nose bleeding and the diarrhea. By the way, I'm in the #1 leukemia unit in the world at LDS, Fimbo Peterson. The Anderson Cancer Center they do work with them. They are great. I sent them to them. They're absolutely outraged. There's going to be some backlash on this. They are outraged at this. Gupta, at the time, no one in Hiroshima understood how dangerous radiation could be. Little Rush grew up among playing the radiation ruins. Komoki, I was just too small to know how much radiation material is staying in the ground. Gupta, when she was 11, Komoki, she lost her friend to leukemia and she began to suspect that the bomb had long-term invisible effects on her city. She wanted to learn more about what killed her friends and how to stop it. Eventually, she went to medical school and she learned about radiation. Let's check so this camera's still going. Komiaki, I volunteered during summertime to check all those people who were exposed to the atomic bomb. Later in the medical training, Dr. Komiaki learned that radiation could actually save lives and not just ruin them. Komiaki, when I saw these patients who are cured by radiation treatment, you know, I saw the light and I said, oh my goodness, this is incredible. I want to talk about my cancer. I would not recommend chemo, heavy chemo to anyone. These tumors wrapped around my lower bowel and were strangling. I was literally hours from death. As you people know, this played out in real time. I was losing 7, 8 pounds a day. I was in radical critical conditions. I wouldn't do heavy chemo unless it was the last resort. It was the last resort. So I did it. I took it, you know, and my body barely, I don't survive. I had to do radiation, some radiation in the area. Well, Dr. Thompson, a radiologist for 33 years, I was one of the very last patients he radiated. And I wouldn't even have done the radiation, the therapeutic radiation after the heavy doses of chemo if it was not for Fimbo Peterson and him. His brilliant, because they have to be so careful. We know that radiation, when you're in a furnace, I mean, it's accumulated, the worst thing you can have, but I let him do it. We did it very, very lightly, whatever, because we know. So the people of Japan, they knew. This is such grotesque malice. Gupta, as a cancer specialist, she used radiation to treat patients and educates people how radiation can be a force of good, both in the United States and our native Japan, where most cancer patients forego this type of treatment because they fear radiation so much. For nearly a decade, Kai has made it her mission to change that. You don't think that fear is warranted? Absolutely it's warranted. 100% is it warranted. If you're like the people of Hiroshima, like the people of Japan, like us here in Utah, you know, the Nevada test site, we have it in our bodies. The worst thing we could put in our body is more radiation because it is accumulating. It's a very scary thing. For her to say that these people are afraid for no reason, oh, they knew what they were talking about. This hyperbole that these people are some kind of ignorant is bizarre when they were in the heart of this. Komiak, I really truly hope you know that people, they don't get any wrong idea. You know this accident of the nuclear plant is not like a regular radiation treatment. You think? Gupta, for now she's back in the United States treating patients, but hopes to head to Japan again soon to help her homeland and to continue to spread her message. Radiation doesn't always have to be a dirty word. Wow. Wow is all I can say. All I can say is this is it. And all you people that Johnny come lately, you hypocrites that want to join this force, this is a passionate, intense fight. You guys lost for a lot of years. We're winning this war. We are winning this war. So don't you question my motives. Don't you question, because when I attack something and I do something, and anybody that ever knows me, when I do something, I do it all the way. And when I do something, I have end results, like shutting down nuclear plants in Southern California. When I do something, I finish it. And I get results. You hypocrites didn't finish the job. You lay down and just turned into air suckers. You are the problem. So don't Johnny come lately to me. Don't you freaking lecture to me. Don't you give me a freaking, with hiding a name, some hyperbole comment when you do not know this tale, this story. Do your homework first. Not even do your homework. Where did you go? This was, you all laid down and you quit. Not me. I never laid down and quit for one day. Because I don't eat, sleep, drink this. I literally sleep with this. I'm fighting for my life. I got a clean freaking bone marrow test on the 6th. Ready to hit the road and ready to fight on. Stay on tune.